All right, I have celiac disease, fibromyalgia. I have chronic migraines that could be their own thing or connected to anything. I lived with endometriosis for about a decade or a little bit more before it was corrected. And so I'm a survivor of that and CPTSD for the chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. Um, there are some things I have not been formally diagnosed with, but I have a misdiagnosis of ADD going back to my childhood that just kind of has laced itself into a lot of things.
That's understandable. Misdiagnosis can cause a lot of problems.
Together, they make really weird challenges.
That they do.
So
Is there,
I think celiac is what I chose for today.
yes. All right. So, how did you get diagnosed with celiacs?
Um, I had to go to two doctors for my investigation once we started to think celiac could be the problem. My first doctor sent me to a gastroenterologist where they did the endoscopy and colonoscopy in the same trip. And at that time, the doctor said that he didn't see anything significant. So he sent me home with an IBS diagnosis, which
Oh no, you froze. I'll just wait. Hopefully, it'll catch up.
the same tests on me. And she told me that from the biopsy and everything that they did in my colonoscopy to check my intestines, there were significant sign of improvement. So the villi in my gut tract, I know that's the wrong term for it, but they are the little things that help food get absorbed into your system, and they become damaged when celiac patients have a gluten protein from wheat. It just kind of, they get worn down. So by the second imaging, my doctor was able to see that I've had some of this villi grow back, which your villi doesn't become damaged unless you have certain kinds of damage, and celiac is really up there for this is what can destroy your villi. So when they have different stages of growth, it's evidence of something like celiac. And so I got a formal diagnosis a year after my first initial testing round.
I think there was a part in there that got cut out because it froze.
Okay.
So I might need you to repeat what you said. I feel really bad, but you were like mid-sentence and your face froze and there was no audio.
Oh no.
So there's probably like a minute in there that's missing. So I got the
Okay.
endoscopy, colonoscopy part, and then it started with the villi. And so there was a gap. Um, also, could you maybe explain in layman terms like what an endoscopy or colonoscopy is? Just because I know some people have no idea what those are.
Okay. So the two tests that colonoscopy is where they take a camera and they kind of look inside of you from the rear end. And I have not experienced this awake, though it's something that many patients have been able to have a like a numbing or calming agent and be awake. So I had the other test, the endoscopy. That's where they take the camera and they look through your front and they go all the way down to your gut. And that's way more unpleasant. So people normally get anesthesia for that. And I was able to schedule both tests together so that they could just knock me out, do all of the traumatic things and take their pictures, get their biopsies. It is just an easy way to see what's happening inside of the body when you have a complaint, but looking on the outside or a blood test isn't going to help you. Does that make sense?
That does actually. Yeah, I have had both done myself, so I've been there. I wasn't fully sedated, so it was very terrible.
I'm so
Um, oh, not your fault. It's the doctor's fault.
well, the preparation for these tests is just as intense.
Mm-hmm.
You have diet restrictions a certain amount of time starting, and if you're getting the bottom view, you have to cleanse yourself, as it were, and it involves drinking a very uncomfortably nasty drink that it's like a laxative, and you just kind of need to make sure that when they use the camera there's nothing in the way, and that's the most uncomfortable part, was preparation for that test.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The prep was terrible because you can't eat anything. You're on like liquids the entire day before, and then
Yeah.
you're drinking like a liter or two of a laxative mix, and it's just playing the potty dance, so to speak. 'Cause,
Race, dance, tango, it's a
yeah,
lot. A lot of
I had a laptop set up in my bathroom, and I just stayed there.
play Skyrim.
Yeah, yeah, you got to do what you got to do because you can't really go out of the house or go anywhere while you have to do the prep. You have to like stay inside. Not that I go anywhere really, but yeah.
Well, it takes a lot of determination to get through the prep to get the test, and that was for me the hardest part. I don't like to drink things that are gross to me, so it's really hard to just. All right,
Yeah. So through
so
those tests, is that how you got your diagnosis?
yes, there's something inside your digestive tract called villi, and they're just kind of little fingers that grab onto the nutrients as food passes through your body. And when you have celiac disease, they can become damaged and go away. One of the problems with celiac is it can cause severe malnutrition because you don't have the villi anymore to grab your food and get it to your bloodstream. So in the first test, my doctor didn't notice anything. In the second test, they noticed the villi had a stage of growth and repair, which I guess had meant my villi had all been uniformly damaged. So they didn't look different when my doctor was testing, and he hadn't had a prior test when my gut health was at its peak. So the second doctor said, all right, your gut's been healing. We're going to go with celiac because it runs in my family and it is one of the things that can damage the villi. And because they had grown back, that was significant. They shouldn't be gone if I didn't have a problem.
I actually didn't know about the villi, so I feel like I'm learning stuff. So thank you.
It's kind of confusing because I know I'm using the wrong words, except villi is the right word. I just can't remember where they live. If they're in your small intestine or large intestine, it's just somewhere in there in that gut.
And
And
there's a lot like large intestine is large, but the small intestine's really long. There's so much of it.
well, when celiac is active in your body and you're taking all of that internal damage, it also activates your immune system.
Hmm.
So imagine that you have a fire alarm, but there's no fire in the house, but all of your safety measures are activating to put out a fire. So my healthy blood cells get attacked by my immune system because eating the gluten protein found in wheat, rye, and barley sends out that signal. So
Wow.
my my health was terrible. I weighed 82 pounds.
Oh
I was
wow.
sick at the time, and I had no energy. Everything was just life was getting so hard to live because I wasn't a good height for 80 pounds. I was in my 20s. I've actually due to a different medication. I'm back. I've grown back, but it I had never bounced back from celiac without fibromyalgia medicine physically. So it's weird. That's like two things that intersect, but I don't want to go off on a tangent about the fibro issue. But I think the hardest part for me was surviving long enough for my doctor to listen to me when I said I have problems and eating a cheeseburger is not going to fix it. I had several doctors call me anorexic. They blamed me of substance abuse for things that might cause a person to lose weight. They, one person said I was just imagining it. I couldn't possibly be eating the amount of calories that I told them I was eating while I was in the process of losing that weight. I honestly don't know when I truly developed celiac disease. I only know that I went from 115 pounds to 82 pounds in the course of 3 years. And it just melted off so slow that I didn't catch it until I was about 90 pounds. Because I'm kind of small and everything I own has kind of fit me within the same comfort range. And then once that, I noticed things are just a tint on my body. I don't own a scale, so my priority was go to the doctor and ask them why I'm changing.
Mm-hmm.
And that just go to therapy, eat a cheeseburger, lifestyle suggestions that made absolutely no sense to me in that situation.
Well, and not being listened to just adds to the problem, and that seems to be a long-standing issue between the chronic illness community, is that the doctors aren't listening. And there are good doctors out there. I'm not saying all doctors are bad, but there are a fair amount that just brush things off. Like, oh, it's stress, or oh, it's probably mental health related. And if I find that if you're a woman, it's a little more difficult to be listened to in the medical system because it's like, oh, you're drug seeking. And it's like, no, actually, I have really bad pain and I want you to figure out why. Like, I'm allergic to a lot of medications that are for pain. So I'm not seeking a pain med. I'm just asking you to figure out why it hurts, you know,
Yeah.
or look into this symptom. So that leads me into my next question, which is what kind of symptoms do you actually have with celiac?
When it was untreated, it was all mostly gastrointestinal to begin. Just imagine having a stomach flu. You're nauseous all the time, bloated, things aren't digesting smoothly, constantly having to use the bathroom. Um,
Mm.
at the point when I asked for government disability help, I was spending about a third of my day on the toilet.
Oh.
I would just, I mean, yes, irritable bowel syndrome
Mm-hmm.
did end up being a result of the untreated celiac, but it wasn't on its own thing. So I was having that. And in the beginning, all food hurt to digest. It only got better after a couple of years. Now that I am living a celiac life, which is basically avoiding gluten or the gluten from wheat, rye, and barley. So I typically don't have symptoms unless I'm exposed to it. And avoiding exposure is the challenge because I didn't know this until I started my celiac journey, but they use wheat gluten in a lot of things and barley. Barley is good for making a flavor profile to beverages like tea. It's in beer a lot if anybody enjoys alcohol or the alcohol-free versions of these grains. Obviously it's in bread, but then I found it's in cosmetics. So I had a lot of years where my immune system was reacting to things and I didn't understand my environment was the toxic thing and all my body can do is just attack. So for me, a symptom is I will get really bad acne that I call ouchne. There is a name for it in the celiac world. I forgot it,
That's okay.
but it's when you have just a really bad skin reaction that can rash and acne out on you, and it doesn't go away until you end your exposure. It's very painful when it happens, and if I use the wrong shampoo, it, washing my hair exposes me to gluten. Going to the grocery store, I like to wear a mask now because when they have an active bakery, the
Oh.
flour in the air, that's enough to make me sick if I'm like really breathing in and being part of the atmosphere, it will get into me. Or I have fidgeting issues, so I'll touch something and then I'll touch my face. And through that, I in public will expose myself to things that if I just couldn't touch stuff, if I had that in me to not touch things, I would have less exposure. So I kind of have some nervous habits going on with the celiac that bring challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the hardest thing is when I haven't been exposed to gluten in a long time and I get exposed to it, I feel like I have a flu. My throat will hurt, my stomach will hurt, I'll get a headache, and I have one part of my jaw that just goes crazy with pain. And I call it the gluten tooth. I don't know what it is, but it seems to just scream out whenever I've accidentally eaten something I shouldn't have, or
Mm-hmm.
have been to the grocery store and didn't rinse off my food before I used it. I have to wash my vegetables. If I buy something that was stored in the bakery section, like sometimes they put my gluten-free bread in the bakery, I have
Why?
to wash the package off or risk the contamination. All right, something we haven't actually got to yet. This is important for context.
Yes.
The amount of exposure it takes to trigger an immune system response is so small you can't see it. It is like a fraction of a speck of flour. Like if you imagine one grain of flour by itself, that's small in its own. That is all it takes. So there's a lot of, I don't want to call it tension, but there's a lot of disagreement in people about how much exposure is going to make you sick versus how much exposure is negligible. There's a parts per million rating on commercial food packaging that's different in every country, and it tells you how much wheat can get accidentally put into your produced food before it's unsafe for your specific condition. Sometimes it's listed at 5 parts per million, 10 parts per million, 15 parts per million. Some companies get away with 20 parts per million. And it makes no sense to me because it takes one part.
Yeah, that's like allergy stuff. Like if something says it may contain tree nuts or almonds or stuff like that, I don't eat it. May contain means more than likely going to hurt me, so I just don't.
Yes.
And then I've had things that say that they're, or someone's gotten me something or sent me something that has like a made in a factory that they also do almonds. Then no, like I can't eat that stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually think about that kind of stuff with celiac, and it's actually very mind opening. And I really appreciate you sharing because I have a friend that also has celiacs, and I didn't even think about cleaning the packaging and that sort of thing. I'm gonna actually suggest that to her.
If her food is kept in the bakery next to where they're cooking, that's all it takes. And I kind of stopped doing it lately,
Hmm.
and I'm having bizarre, just parts of my skin are really unhappy, and I don't know. It's probably because I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And I feel silly when I do it, but I shouldn't because this is how I survived celiac without getting stomach cancer or without having a flu-like attack on my body all the time. Some people get additional food sensitivities along with their celiac. I have a dairy sensitivity. And some people, it expands out into the world of nuts and certain oils, vegetables, fruits. Every person's individual. So if I guess you're predisposed to having certain sensitivities in your family, then you may want to make sure that if your uncle or grandpa had a hard time eating grapefruit, check on yourself if you have celiac, because you may also have all of the family issues in your body and no one's really going to talk about it. Like, I brought something special for this. I got a
There you go.
Grandpa Rusty Venture.
There we
He
go.
always wears a speed suit. Every picture I have of him, he's wearing coveralls. He is my celiac family member who helped to raise me. And I thought I knew everything about celiac disease from my childhood. I didn't know anything until I got celiac disease. And I would remember Grandpa always saying, let me read the can. If wheat's on the bottom, I'll eat it. Because he didn't have the science we have now that talks about the amount of exposure. He thought he could just have a little bit and it would be okay. He was thin his whole life, had to have B12 shots. I have to take B12 because I don't get enough in my diet without wheat, which is a B12 source. And I think his health suffered because he was not strict on his diet and he would let things slip. When you have celiac and you share a kitchen with somebody and you have a jelly that you want to put on your toast or something, and one person takes out the jelly knife and puts their toast together, and the celiac person uses that same jelly jar, it's contaminated with toast crumbs. So you have to have two of everything, one dedicated and one for everyone else, or you have to have your kitchen completely dedicated like my home is. I don't allow it in my house because I've had mistakes and my house cannot be unsafe. That's my rule. My home is my castle. It's where I go to get away from the rest of the world. When I interact with other people, I take on the responsibility to wear gloves and a mask, protect myself, and remember not to touch things and then my face. It's a practice. Otherwise, things go wrong. I mean, I have a lot of nitpicks too about social life and celiac diagnosis if we have time for that.
Yeah, we do. We have 8 minutes, so feel free to share.
Oh, the bread is sad. It is dismal. It's always stale. Imagine the stale end of regular bread. That is celiac bread all the time. At its softest, it is like, I would cry sometimes, but I don't. I used to. I mourned my food. I practically had a funeral for my old life. And it was like dying because everything had to change. People were gone. I was sad all the time. Still am a little bit. We don't get restaurants, by the way. There's one restaurant in San Diego that is all gluten free with the exception of a beer stand way in the corner where they make their own beer, but it doesn't come in contact with the food. All the food is safe for a celiac, but not necessarily for all of the other diets or restrictions. So there's a lot of nuts. Celiac food comes with a lot of things that people are allergic to because it's what we have to use to replace the wheat plant. So we miss out on a lot of things. Like, my friend is getting married this week. Traditionally, people have things like wedding cake and snacks. I have to bring my own because I cannot eat a cake that was made at a bakery. If I want to have anything to eat, I got to pack a lunch. So formal events are changed. Family birthdays. If somebody has a friend with a birthday or a partner with a birthday and they want to have a traditional cake, we miss out on that. And some of us are even scared to hug the people that are eating the stuff because what's the one thing people do when they eat? When it's a casual situation, you rub your hands on your clothes. You get the crumbs off on your legs. I don't think about that before celiac. After celiac, I'm watching my friends run around with their kids, and their kid has a cookie in his hand, and that kid comes over to me, and instead of just scooping him up and saying, "You're the best kid," I'm like scared. I'm scared of you because you have a cookie, you have a weapon, you have weaponized food, and it changes the way I act when I'm around people that I care about, or how often I'm invited to things that matter to people because, oh, she's not going to have a good time. She can't eat the food. Don't worry about inviting her. And it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense, but it hurts. Being excluded hurts. And having no ability to just go to my friends' homes and be comfortable, it gives me anxieties that I didn't have before. And inviting people into my home is an ordeal because I have to know, are your hands dirty? Did you eat on the way over here? Will you please wash your hands with my soap that I know is safe, because vitamin E in hand soap can have gluten depending on who made it. Soap is dangerous now. It's like, if they come over, I have to feed them. My food sucks, so I have to find something good enough to entertain for guests who aren't used to my kind of diet restriction. And it makes life this big hurdle. Just everything has an obstacle on it now, a big gluten obstacle that I have to figure out how to skirt around or jump over.
I can relate to a lot of that stuff with like mast cell activation because it is very isolating and you know, there's like fear of leaving my home. There's fear of having people in my home. There's that feeling like it's a big ask, but at the same time, it's like it's my life, you know, and I'm not willing to put my life on the line for people anymore. So I totally understand and relate to a lot of what you just said. And I hear you.
I watched back on your videos because I was like, all right, I've seen the stuff that you've been putting out just like in the last couple of months, but I didn't really go back to your beginning and your story. You've been through a lot, and I know hugs.
Thank you. Hugs back.
And what you say about people, that is the truth. That it is really hard when they go, and when it's because they can't handle the changes that are going on. And
Yeah, there's lots of us that have been hurt by people that way. And it's this conversation I've had with numerous people, and I've had people say, "Oh no, you know, I would never do that." And they do it. They do the same thing. They can't handle it, they leave. And I warned them at the beginning, you may get burnt out and you may leave and you may change into someone you don't like if you don't get the help that you need. Oh no, that's not me. And when that pattern repeats itself, it just makes me want to make more videos so that it doesn't happen to other people.
I think you should. I think people should be talking about, yes, the diseases, the technical parts, it's important to know,
Mm-hmm.
but we're humans. We eat food, we have friends, we have love and passion, and we want to do things. And maybe we can't go across town to do them anymore, but we still want to do them. Like, every time I bring up to a person that we don't have restaurants and they're a chef or they work in a restaurant, they go, "Oh, well, it's just so hard to feed you people." And I'm like, so you're telling me I don't deserve to have a baked potato that's safe if it's the only thing on your menu because you don't want to put in the effort to make it on this side of the kitchen and to rinse the potato off and use it, use, dedicate things. We're 10% of the population. Diagnosed. Celiac is 10% of the United States population, possibly world. It may be more if we're talking world. That's a lot of people that aren't going out to eat.
There's a
I think
big hole in the market there. Like, you know, people could be helping people and also they could be making revenue off
if
of an
they
untapped section in the restaurant business, right?
my my favorite thing to complain about right now. You're in Canada. You get something I don't get to have in America. Doritos.
Oh, I didn't know those weren't in the States.
Well, no, they have them. The problem is how they manufacture the Doritos in America versus Canada. You get Doritos made on a dedicated line that doesn't have other products with wheat being processed. In America, they make our Doritos in the same factory. So, due to a possibility of cross contamination, I am not allowed to eat over half of the food that Frito-Lay makes and the big companies that own the foods. Like my brain's just forgetting who owns everything right now. Nestle, Nabisco, Frito-Lay, all the big companies. Every region has a different manufacture process. And the celiacs are affected by that when they don't separate their product lines for things that are technically free of an allergen. They save money by creating it in the same space, but then all the money they're saving is money they're losing from us. And it's not just about money. It's like, don't we deserve things?
You do deserve things.